Hello, my friends, and welcome to Momentum Boost. I'm your host, Adrienne Gold-Davis, and I'm very grateful that you're joining me here today. So to ask our guests a question, and you will want to, you just type it into the Q&A box or in the chat box at the bottom of your screens. So the commandment to welcome and embrace the stranger appears 36 times in our Torah, our instruction manual for living. And the text reads as follows. It says, "When a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not do them wrong. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens. You shall love them as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." And on today's Boost, we're going to meet two people who have made this their mandate, both in the micro and the macro, in the local and in the global. Joining us today is Carrie Brody. Carrie is the founder and executive director of Emma's Torch. It's a nonprofit restaurant in Brooklyn, New York, that provides culinary training and job placement services to refugees, asylees, and survivors of human trafficking. Also joining us today is Juliana Pena. She's IsraAID's Programs Officer for the Americas and the former IsraAID Colombia Country Director. IsraAID is an Israeli humanitarian nonprofit that responds to global disasters and stays to provide support for the long term. Please join me in welcoming Carrie and Juliana. What a privilege. Oh, it's such a privilege to have you both here, especially this week of Thanksgiving. There's so much to talk about, and I feel like I'm in the presence of some very seriously powerful women, and I know that your example and the way you move through the world will help all of us. So I'm going to start, Carrie, for you first. Okay, can you tell us what compelled you to actually open Emma's Torch? Tell us about Emma's Torch and how it's helping to welcome and embrace the new immigrant in the community locally and of course within your community as well.
Of course. Thank you so much for including me in this. It feels so apt that we're celebrating Thanksgiving this week and just thinking about those moments of gratitude that we get to be doing this work. For me, this journey really began when I saw there was a photo of Alan Kurdi, this 3-year-old little boy whose body was washed up on the shores of Greece. And I know millions of people around the world saw that photo, and perhaps it was a shared experience of this feeling of we're seeing the worst moments of our history. We're seeing moments that I think that for many of us as Jews, we can feel this sense of a connection because we know what it is when the doors are closed to us. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I didn't have a solution. At the time, there were 65 million people displaced around the world. That number has climbed north of 70 million at this point. Right. But at the same time, I was volunteering at a homeless shelter and was playing around with this idea that maybe there's a little something we can do. Maybe there's something that we can do to change the story for one person or two people, and maybe that's enough. And so I decided to, well, really with the push from my husband, which I'm very grateful for, I decided to give this crazy idea of creating a place where we could be welcoming in the stranger through food and through economic mobility through food, and to see if it could really take off. And so nearly 4 years since that crazy idea, we now have a restaurant and cafe in Carroll Gardens. Before COVID, we had a catering business, and actually today Citi Field put out a memo. Next season at the baseball, part of the baseball season, we'll have a concession stand featuring the food that our students create as part of their building new lives here.
So were you a chef before, or your husband?
I was not. Well, I would say I was not classically trained. I was perhaps chutzpah trained. I was very lucky. I grew up in a household where every Friday night we were preparing these lavish meals. And even though I did end up going to culinary school and working in restaurants as part of this journey to create this organization, the best training I ever received was from my grandmothers and my mother. They are very fastidious and taught me well.
Oh, it's fabulous. I want to hear more about it, but first I want to ask something for Juliana just for a moment and bring you into the conversation, my friend. So tell us about IsraAID's mandate to respond to the global refugee crisis. I mean, obviously on a global level, And what are you actually doing for the Venezuelan refugees in Colombia? And if you could give us an understanding of what's really happening in Venezuela, so then we're looking at it globally and locally as well. So give us the global perspective.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for having us, Adrian. It's a pleasure for me to be here, share a little bit of what we do as an organization. So, in terms of the refugee crisis, it is a global phenomenon that, as Kerry was saying, unfortunately keeps raising its numbers as years go by. So, at the moment, we work not only in Colombia responding to this crisis, but we also have offices in South Sudan, Uganda, Germany, and Greece. Particularly in Colombia, we started, and we start the majority of our missions this way. We come in when there is an ongoing emergency. And the special thing about Colombia and about the Venezuelan refugee crisis is that it's an emergency that has lasted for the last 5 years. And again, unfortunately, I wish I could bring more positive numbers and figures, but unfortunately, it's exacerbating. So we started our response in Cucuta. Cucuta is one of the border cities between Colombia and Venezuela. Okay. But what is happening is that as of today, almost 4 million Venezuelans have left their country, either to Colombia, to other neighboring countries such as Mexico, Ecuador. Some of them also try to reach Spain because of the language, sure. Mexico. And the fact is that almost half of those refugees and migrants are in Colombia. And Colombia already has a complicated history of conflict, of millions of internally displaced people because of the internal conflict. So if you add to that 2 million refugees and migrants that are in dire need of health, education, protection, access to basic services, it's a very complicated situation for the government to respond 100% to. So that's where civil society comes in. That's where we came in.
Wow.
To support.
So both of you, I mean, I'm hoping we'll have time for you to share what it was personally that made you move in this direction. I think all of us feel a yearning to make a difference, but you actually made a life of it. What I want to get out there first is, are there any stories or successes, Carrie, I'll start with you, that you've seen because of your efforts that were gratifying and that somehow, changed you? So I guess first you'd have to tell us how your system works, and then give me a story.
We've had almost 100 graduates at this point from our program. And I would say that there's 100 stories there. There's 100 families, 100 microcosms. And the way that our program works is that it is a fully paid job apprenticeship program. So our students join us for 10 weeks where they're earning a livable wage the entire time. And they're taking English classes, math classes, job readiness classes, and cooking classes. But unlike your typical culinary school, the menu that we have at our restaurant is developed around those classes. So for example, the first day that you're learning about chopping, you're going to be chopping a lot of items that end up in our shakshuka sauce because the sauce can mask any sort of imperfections in chopping. And it grows from there. And then at the end of this program, we work with our students to not only help them find jobs, but really to begin careers. And for each of our students, that looks a little different. They each have different needs. About 70% of our graduates are women, many of whom it's the first time that they're being given the opportunity to work outside the home. And so we really want to respect that journey. There's one story that really stands out to me because usually we can talk about the numbers of, 98% of our graduates begin jobs, the amount of money they're earning. But I think that sometimes the numbers don't tell the full story. And we had one graduate who was a survivor of really aggravated human trafficking. And when we enrolled her in the program, her case manager contacted me and said, Carrie, look, it's taking a risk. I don't know if she's at a point where she can get through this program. So it's up to you, but just warning you that getting through this program would be a huge victory. And there were ups and downs, but she graduated. And not only did she graduate, she was able to begin a new job. And not only did she begin a new job, she actually created her own business where she started her own little catering company and has picked up a couple of private clients. And not only that, she is using her spare time to go back to the shelter where where she first sought refuge, where she was really saved and rescued and saved herself, to speak to the people living there and to help them on their journey and to talk about it. So I'm really, really proud to just know her, and to be able to witness that.
I'll say, my heavens, it just, you know, what we're capable of when we work together. Juliana, what about you? Can you share a story that feels more personal?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I can share tons, but luckily now it comes like the positive answer. So I can tell you the story of one spectacular woman. Her name is Elsie, and okay. So then, first, one of our first activities back in 2019 was psychosocial support groups um, that included community leaders, because one of something that is very important for us as an organization is that whenever we arrive to a country, we partner both with the communities and the government, as I was saying before, but also grassroots organizations.
Okay.
So on the community component, we had this psychosocial support workshop for leaders, and one of them turned out to be Elsie. So Elsie, back in Venezuela, she holds 2 master's degrees in psychology and sorry, I'm translating from Spanish, and childhood education.
Uh-huh.
And because of the dire economic situation that she was going through, she was forced to go to Colombia. In Colombia, her entire living was different. She didn't have access because she had to get a lot of like her documents legalized. She had like half of her family in different parts of Venezuela, so she was going through a very complex personal situation. But then she found out about the workshop that we were organizing. She attended, she approached us, she told us about all the background that she had. And at the moment, we were also creating a child-friendly space for Venezuelan and Colombian children that don't have access to school. So then we thought, okay, well, great. If you want to start volunteering with us, then we'll see how that goes. And luckily for us, she stayed with us. We were able to offer her a longer stay with us, and she's now part of the team. So she's able to apply all her academic background. And what it's interesting about it is that the team is her, who's Venezuelan, but also Colombian displaced people, and the host community that is hosting now the Venezuelan refugees and migrants that are coming. So it's actually this child-friendly space that we created. It's a hub for tolerance and building this kind of new community. And yeah, it's great.
Tell me something. Is there something unique about Israel that it creates this kind of, I mean, IsraAID is clearly on the front lines all the time. And you, Carrie, I mean, obviously you grew up in a Jewish home, and you said that much of this that you're doing was learned at the knee of your grandmother, your mother, and so on. What do you see Israel's role in what it is that you do, Juliana? And then Carrie, I'm going to ask you something else. So what do you think, Juliana?
Okay, well, one very interesting and unique thing that we're doing in this child-friendly space is that, well, you know that Israel is famous for its startup culture and the use of technology in very creative and innovative ways. So we actually started implementing a project called Matika. So Matika is an Israeli startup that developed this math software that fosters self-learning. And this is very, very important, because what happens with a lot of the Venezuelan refugee and migrant kids that we have in our child-friendly space is that they miss school for months or years in Venezuela. The teachers left, or well, they were walking, because a lot of them literally walked from Caracas to Colombia, which is days and days of walk. So they miss school. So then you have, for instance, I don't know, one child that was almost 7 years old, and he didn't know how to hold a pencil. So this software, this Israeli software, becomes very important because what we have in the child-friendly space, it's multi-level classes. So then we have one class that has kids on the ages between 9 and 11. And you know, for a child, especially when they're becoming like adolescent, it's not always great to have to share their classroom with kids that are younger and to feel that they don't have the same skills. So this software is great because then we installed tablets in the child-friendly space, which is actually also great for the community, because if it wasn't for the project, probably they wouldn't have had access to that technology. And
Right.
then each child has their own learning experience. So it's not a teacher that expects the 20-25 children to be on the same level, but each child has their own process, and that empowers them a lot. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And Carrie, I suspect you've seen some interesting and even surprising things in your work on a communal level. I'm just curious, before you tell me more about what you've seen and experienced that perhaps came as a surprise or a shock or even just as a learning experience, what's it like with the neighbors around where you are? Are people testy about what you opened? Do you have support? Generally, do people come and eat there specifically to support this, and do they know about it, and how do they know about it?
Thank you for that question. It's actually something that has really given me such a motivation, because there could have been a situation where maybe people didn't welcome in this idea or thought, I don't know if I want that in my neighborhood. And we've seen the opposite. Our neighbors here in Brooklyn have been so welcoming. We deliberately chose to open our restaurant in a competitive restaurant neighborhood. We wanted to show that we could do this, that we could create food. And the restaurant owners have welcomed us in open arms because they want to hire our graduates. Our neighbors have come in. I mean, we serve hundreds of people every week. And before COVID, the restaurant was packed. And that really has helped us because it funds about 50%, over 50% of the organization. And even now, because of COVID, we're seeing so much outreach from people wanting to help. And it's even allowed us to give back more. We're working with another organization to provide 600 meals a week for people experiencing homelessness, which is another avenue that we've never done before. And it really, I think, gives credence to the idea that it's a community project. It's our neighbors coming together and saying, these are our values.
This makes me so happy to hear. Somebody has just asked from the audience, what are the sources of funding for your culinary training and job placement program? And by the way, what's the name of the restaurant?
Of course. So the name of the restaurant and the organization are one and the same, Emma's Torch. We're named after Emma Lazarus, who was a Jewish American woman with a lot of chutzpah. She wrote the poem that's on the Statue of Liberty, the "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses." In terms of funding, we're really fortunate. We have a combination of the revenue from our businesses. We're a social enterprise, so every dollar spent on anything to do with Emma's Torch goes to support our graduates and our students. And then we've been supported by some small foundations throughout the US, as well as individual donors. I remember we launched on what can only be described as a shoestring, with $18 donations coming in every few days, and figuring out how do we turn that $18, that high donation, into a life-changing program. And so even though we've grown past that at this point, we still are really just so fortunate for every dollar that comes in.
I can just imagine. Okay, I'm going to get personal for a minute. Juliana, how did you end up devoting your life to this kind of work? I mean, this is a career choice as well. What do you think motivated you? Did something happen in your family of origin that taught you? Did your parents teach you to be a giver, or was it part of your nature? And if so, how did they model it?
Well, I think that growing up as a Jewish woman, the concept of tikkun olam has always been very important for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel, well, my background is from Colombia. I'm originally from Colombia, and I think that when you grow up in countries in Latin America, one of the biggest challenges that we have is inequality and the absence of a very big middle class. So I always wonder how could I do more and feel that I was actually practicing that tikkun olam that I had heard so many times at the Bet Knesset. And you know, like one book that I read, I don't even remember, or I think it's just like a combination of many things, until I found out what international development was and humanitarian response. And here I am, 5 years later, still very much in love of what I do.
Oh, it should last till you're 120. It's such a gift. Carrie, have you seen anything or met anyone that surprised you, that whose story deserves being told right here while you have candid audience?
I am very lucky. I get to learn something new every day. I think that what would surprise me at this point would be to have a day without surprises. I think that the thing that's most been a lesson that I've learned for the last few years is that sometimes, again, with the numbers and just the sheer magnitude of the challenge before us, we can lose sight of the individual stories. And I always talk about, there was one of our very first students in our pilot program was a young woman from Saudi Arabia who had fled persecution. And I assumed that she would just want to cook Middle Eastern food. I thought that, well, you're doing culinary training, your dream must be this. And it was such an important lesson to learn that actually she was passionate about Italian food and she wanted to learn about food and technology. And we were able to find her a job that would allow her to also start taking online classes and eventually go to college. And it was an important reminder constantly to not assume that we have all the answers, but that to know that we need to show up as partners. And that's a lesson that I'm grateful to be able to learn over and over again with our students.
Wow. You know, I was thinking, of course, when you think of Tikkun Olam, the repairing of the world, and we're coming up on Thanksgiving, I'd be curious from both of you. Juliana, perhaps you can go first. How has working with refugees helped develop your personal sense of gratitude?
Okay, that's a tough one because I don't know how to put it in words, but it's more whenever you're actually there, whenever I'm actually there with the beneficiaries of our programs, it's such an honor. Like for instance, with this story that I was telling you about Elsie, and seeing that level of resilience and in these women that have lost everything, that have to build themselves from scratch again and again, and then like something else happens and then they bounce back, and it's really, really humbling. And I think that humbleness and gratitude go hand in hand. I guess I hope that's an answer, because just like being able to witness those testimonies and life stories, and also seeing that through our programs, because resilience is actually a concept that we work a lot in our psychosocial support programs. Like it's giving them the tools to build up what already they possess, and it's just enhancing it and empowering them to keep leading their communities. It's I feel very grateful for that.
So interesting when you said that humility and gratitude go hand in hand. I think that's an absolutely true statement. You know, that when you can make room for someone other than yourself, you can also see with a clearer perspective how blessed you are. And part of the blessing is to be able to give of yourself to someone else. There is something particularly powerful in the freedom to give to others. I think that many refugees, many immigrants only want an opportunity to give, that, you know, nobody wants to be continually on the receiving end. And Carrie, I'm curious, talk to me about gratitude and how that's developed in you as a result of what you do.
It's so interesting that you just said that, because it's been amazing. The last few weeks, we've produced thousands of meals for people experiencing homelessness, and our students are always excited to be here and demonstrate so much hope and optimism. But when we talk to them about the fact that their food that they were creating is going to help people who are in these dire circumstances, they were so excited about the opportunity to give back. And I often think about Hannah Senesh is another famous Jewish poet. Maybe that's just where my brain goes these days. She wrote one of her poems about the power that is to be a match and what it means to be a match that gets burned up in doing good and gets to get burned up as part of this cohesive pursuit of goodness. And so I think about that often, that sometimes the thing that even when I'm stressed and even when the little things in my life I can feel frustrated by, I feel so blessed that my frustration or work or all of that gets to be part of this larger picture. And that to me is something that I'm always just so grateful for.
It's interesting, Carrie, and Juliana, you know, you referenced that poem about being a match. The other thing about being a match, which is intrinsic to that, is that while that match is lit, you can light many, many candles. In fact, the Torah tells us that, you know, a flame does not lose any of itself when it's igniting someone else. So, you know, when you burn yourself down, that there's somebody else carrying that Emma's torch, of course. So, you know, I just hope that you both will continue to have the strength, the energy, the koach to continue your mission. I mean, obviously this is an international mandate, and whether you're working from, you know, from Colombia or whether you're, you know, you're working in your local neighborhood, what you're doing is bring such profound light. I feel very proud to know you. If I could give you both an opportunity to share a statement with our viewers about how you believe that they could potentially activate their flame, even during lockdown, what can they do? How can they help? I don't know whether IsraAID is taking volunteers at this time. Carrie, I don't know what Emma's Torch can do, but basically, since you have such exposure to people who have just arrived here and some who are traumatized, what kind of things do these refugees need that can help turn them from strangers into family for us? I'll let you begin, Juliana.
Thank you. Well, actually, I don't know if you have seen it in the news, but Hurricane Iota caused devastation in Colombia. Two islands that are very close to Nicaragua. They're called San Andres and Providencia. In Providencia, 90% of the infrastructure was completely destroyed. Our office is in Barranquilla, which is also in the Caribbean, but in inland Colombia. One of the communities where we work, it was flooded. Not completely, but still we had to respond. We're responding at the moment, distributing hygiene and dignity kits. And one city that it's very close, that is called Cartagena. It's one of the most touristic ones, so maybe this one will ring more bells.
I've been there.
Yeah, well, yeah. So some areas were completely flooded. 150,000 people lost their homes. We're also launching an emergency response there. So in terms of human power, it's a bit complicated because of the COVID regulations, but every donation counts. And if anyone wants to go to our Facebook page, really, every donation has a direct impact on the lives of these people that we work with, on the lives of our local team. We have only local Colombian staff responding at the moment. And in all our missions, that's our policy to really rely and work with local communities. So yeah, and if anyone wants to get more involved in the US, then they can contact my colleague, Rachel Wallace. Her email is rwallace, I hope I'm saying it okay in English, WALLLACE @IsraAID.org.
That's amazing. And we can put all of the contact information in at the end. And Carrie, last word for you.
I think that the thing I would really hope everybody walks away with is the sense that you can do something in your community. There's always a way that we can be doing more. Even now with COVID, we have volunteers all over the country actually working with our graduates on practicing interview skills. We've had people ordering, we now are shipping nationwide a gift box that's made by our graduates. And so while I definitely urge you, please visit our website so you can sign up for our newsletter, emmastorch.org. also look at what's happening in your neighborhood. Where can you find that peace to give back? Where can you find that peace to be a part of it? And you know, you're always welcome to email me, but you don't need me to do this. You have the power to do it.
Oh, it's a beautiful message. You know, we had our first snowstorm last night in Toronto, and one of the things that struck me and I remembered is that when my boys were small, very small, and they wanted to go out play in the snow, I knew there was an old woman who lived down the street alone by herself. And the first thing they had to do before they got to play was they had to shovel her front walk. And it just was an intrinsic but simple local way. And it's never, ever too soon to teach them. Ladies, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your strength, your hope, and all of your clarity. That was illuminating and inspiring. Thank you, Carrie and Juliana. There's been
Thank you.
so many questions. We hope you'll join us again in the future. And to everybody else in Momentum Land, please join us this Wednesday, the 25th of November, for our next booth, because while our lives have transformed dramatically, there is still so much to be grateful for. And tapping into that gratitude really is the key to our physical, emotional, and spiritual health. And I am delighted to tell you that we have together Rabbi David Aaron, whose books include The Secret Life of God and Love is My Religion, and clinical psychologist and psychoanalyst Dr. Stephanie Bott together. And we're going to explore gratitude growing strategies that are critical parts of the healing journey. So to register for our upcoming booths, just visit us at momentumunlimited.org. And this coming December the 6th to the 8th, from 12 noon till 2 p.m. Eastern time every single day, for 3 days, we're having a virtual conference, and it's incredible. We do one every year. This year, obviously, it's virtual, and it's called Action Con, Unmasking Your Superpower to Mend the World. This is a chance to revitalize your soul with celebrity keynotes, inspiring talks with top Jewish educators, and intimate coaching sessions, motivating breakouts. There's so much more. So just click the link in the chat to register now. And it's only $36 for all 3 days. And the first hour is free anyway. So from me, Adrienne Gould Davis, and from all of us at Momentum, remember that as we learn and grow together, the stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens. You shall love them as yourself. For we were strangers in the land of Israel, of Egypt. Good heavens. Blessings.